Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a good week and you are once again looking forward to another wonderful Sunday school session with this lesson that we have before us, which will be opening up our second unit of this, our fall quarter series of lessons. And as always, time is of the essence. These 45 minutes just go by so quickly. So with that being said, shall we rise to our feet? We have an opening word of prayer. And we'll see how the Lord guides us in today's lesson. So shall we pray? Father, it's once again upon this hour and upon this day as always, we come to you as humble as we can. We come once again giving your name all the praise and the glory that only you and you alone are so worthy of. And now, dear Lord, as we're about to embark upon this lesson, we ask blessings upon those that are still on their way and those that could not be here this day. And for those that are here, dear Lord, we ask once again for guidance, for understanding, that we may be able to clearly understand your word and share it yet with others to show us this great God in whom it is that we serve. We ask this day, dear Lord, as we study this lesson, that we may leave here with more than we came with in understanding once again your word. And dear Lord, for this service that we have coming up after this, ask your presence would truly remain among each and every one of us. For it's in Jesus' name we give this prayer. Amen, amen. Amen, folks. Well, once again, we're starting now a new quarterly series. No, I took that back. It's not a quarterly series lesson. It's a new unit that we are in. This is our fall quarter series of lessons. Thus far, we have been studying under one central heading, and that is God is all that. I have basically looked at it more of basically saying that we're studying the omnis of God. As we know, that word we're dealing with, all that, we have the word known as omni, which is a prefix of the Latin word omnius, which basically means all that, all things, all times, to be all complete, to be all powerful, and the list goes on and on there. Our first four lessons we dealt with was God is always present, which pretty much meant that God is omnipresent. He's in all places yet at all times. But now we moved into unit number 2, which takes on a little bit of a different theme. In this particular unit, we're dealing with God is all-knowing, which means that God is omniscient. He knows all things. And if you look back at last week's lesson, which I shall turn to that now, in last week's lesson, we got somewhat of an introduction into this particular unit, because even though last week we was dealing with and closing out God is in all places, all times, if you look at the wording, the writer even speaks of God is all-knowing during that lesson to bring us to where we are. Because in the lesson we had last week, it said these words, thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising. Thy understandeth my thoughts, it says, afar off. With that wording, God understands my thoughts even afar off. You can look at it in two ways. One is that we deal with God being present, that God is not even near, but yet he knows your thoughts. But also, when he talks about he knows your thoughts afar off, is that you didn't even say a word, but God knows what you're thinking. We see that throughout scriptures, and when Jesus was dealing with the Pharisees, and he said he knew their thoughts or knew what they were thinking and so on. Before they even opened their mouth, he knew what was going on. The word talks about even in the word of prayer, when we don't know what to say, God already knows what it is that we are in need of before we even open our mouths to bring it forth. So we saw that there. And verse 4 said, for thou is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. That even backs it up. God, you're saying to God that you don't have a word in your mouth. You don't know what to even say, but God already knows what it is that you have to say before you even bring it forth. But all that now brings us to the lesson that we have for today. In this unit, we're dealing with God is all-knowing. And the title of our lesson is what, my people? God wants Pharaoh through a dream. Everybody read this lesson? Everybody know the backdrop to this lesson? And how we get to where we are? That's important too, to understand that. Now you'll find that, remember in the first week, we came out of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, which says, in the beginning. Now we've gone what? Back to Genesis at chapter 40. So we have 40 chapters that are missing. And don't say, oh, Lord, I'm not going through 40 chapters. Just so you know, I'm not going through all that. I'm going to give you a high overview, and a lot of things going to be left out. But this gets to where we are today in dealing with this lesson that God warns Pharaoh through a dream. We have to go back to a man by the name of Jacob. Okay, Jacob had, trivia question, Jacob had how many children? I only hear one or two people spoke. How many children Jacob had? I still don't hear one or two people speak. Nobody knows, huh? Gigi almost got it. 13. I don't know how. And for you ladies, how you forget this? Because he only had one daughter. He had 13 children, but he had one daughter named Diana. But for some reason, everybody forget the little girl. You would think that's the one that stands out. But you'll find that he had one daughter, but of these 12 sons that he had, they were known as the children of Israel, or children of Jacob, rather. When his name was changed to Israel, which means one who wrestles or contends with God, that's when they started being called the children of Israel. And you'll find that he loved all these children, but you could say one he favored over the others. You know which one this was? Well, Benjamin was the youngest, and truly he loved Benjamin. Joseph. Remember, Joseph favored Joseph. They talk about how he gave him this beautiful coat to wear and all this stuff. And he didn't seem to have what we see in the scriptures to be in a situation that the brothers were. They work in the fields and things of this nature. And he was a little tattletale. He would go back and tell his dad the boys weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and things of that nature. But also God worked through him to bring about the interpretation of dreams. And there was a time in which he told his brothers this dream that he had. And basically his dream was saying that the day going to come where you all going to bow down before me. You know the old saying that some things you might want to keep to yourself? This Mike was one of those because he already had some things against their brother, even though the father loved him, to the point now that they wanted to get rid of him. Some wanted him dead. But you'll find they took him, they threw him in a hole. Reuben comes back later to get him, but he's already gone because they now sold him into slavery. So the brother now is gone. He's been bought by one of the captains of the guards of Pharaoh of Egypt. But once again, God's still watching over him to the point that he pretty much runs the household now. Those great things there. But then you'll find that the captain of the guard wife desired to have sex with him. You're like, whoa, can't go there, you know. But yet, you'll find she accused him of sexual assault, if he had a charge back then, which we know he was innocent. But guess what? He was put in jail for it. And as he is in jail, guess what? Once again, God's watching out for him. He finds favor there to the point that he's almost running the jail system. But there were two other prisoners there at this time that had came into disfavor with Pharaoh. You had the chief baker and you had the chief butler at this time. And you'll find that one night, these two individuals, they both had a dream. The next day, and when Joseph comes in, he sees that they don't look as, you could say, happy as they always look. So what's going on? And each one said, well, we have a dream, but we have no one to interpret the dream. When he tells them this, he then says, well, God is the interpreter of dreams. Tell me your dream. The chief butler says that there was a vine, or 3 vines came up and had grapes on the vine, and he squeezed the grapes and put the juice in a cup, and he saw in the dream where he gave it to Pharaoh. And that was his dream. The chief baker said he had a dream where there were 3 white baskets on top of his head with all kinds of meats in it, and the birds came and ate the meat. So what does this mean? That's when Joseph says to the butler, your dream of these 3 vines, that is in 3 days, you shall be restored back into the house of Pharaoh, as being his cupbearer, as you once were, in 3 days. Joseph says to him, this is what will happen in 3 days, but also I want to tell you this. When you get back to Pharaoh's house, remember me. Tell Pharaoh about me and the situation I'm in, and hopefully he will let me out. As this being said, you could say, I guess the chief baker felt pretty good. He said, well, I had a dream too. And he said his dream was that 3 white baskets on his head and that the birds ate the meat. There's all kinds of, food in there and whatnot. He said, what does this mean? He said, what it means that in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to kill you. And they're going to hang you up. And the birds are going to eat your flesh. And you'll find in 3 days, it was Pharaoh's birthday. The chief baker, he was executed and beheaded, and his body was hanged up. But yet you'll find that the chief butler was restored back as being the king's cupbearer. He forgets all about Joseph. Here we are now, some 2 years later. Pharaoh himself has a dream. And his dream is that he sees these 7 fat cows come up out the river. and they stand on the riverbank. Then out of the river come 7 skinny cows. And the skinny cows eat the fat cows, but guess what? They're still skinny. Then also he has a dream that he has 7 ears of corn that come up. And they're full, good corn. But then the east wind comes along and blows upon them with the hot heat, and they turn and wither and pretty much are nothing. But he says, I do not know what this dream may mean. He brings in all of the so-called astrologers and soothsayers and dreamers and whatnot. None of them can figure out what the dream means. That's when the baker goes, you know something? I remember, butler, I'm sorry, I said baker. The butler says, you know something? I remember a man when I was in jail who could interpret dreams. That's when they bring Joseph in. And this what brings us to where we are in our lesson today. Joseph is there now to interpret the dream of Pharaoh. Anybody know anything about dreams? Any thought about dreams? Because in our day and age, dreams seem to play a role. Martin Luther King said what? Well, everybody know that one. I have a dream. I believe that was a prophetic dream. Talking about future events that will come along that he said he himself may not see, but they will surely, come to pass. We as people would sometimes we'll double it up. We'll say, I dreamed a dream. And use that means something that's good that came along. Sometimes there are events that happen in our life, and what we say, you know something, I just had a dream about that the other day, and it came to pass. So oftentimes we look at dreams in those ways. I'm always amazed that I can't explain how they explain on the show I watch about dreams, about how the brain works and chemicals in your brain and so on. But you ever notice that it was talking about how you dream a dream? How long does a dream last, if you think about it? When you have a dream at night and you talk about your dream, bingo, Anthony. When you dream that dream, you can explain it in 2 or 3 minutes. That's it. But yet you slept for 8 hours. It talks about how the brain works, and it's like time just slows down. But that's how we see dreams, and they're very important today. But back then, they were really important. Because the reason why these individuals were upset, the chief baker, remember the butler, that nobody can interpret the dreams, like, who cares? But they were, got to remember, they was in this polytheistic society where they worship all these gods. Their belief and understanding that on certain dreams they would have, the gods or a god was talking to them, telling them something. So it was very important for them to understand what this God was saying. So that way they would get upset, like, I need to understand this dream because a God is speaking to me. So now you'll find that they want this interpretation to be brought forth. So now Joseph comes forth to interpret dreams because dreams meant a lot to them at that time. Even to Pharaoh now he's wondering, which is odd because you think about it. Pharaoh was a man, right? But how also was Pharaoh looked at? There we go. When you were Pharaoh, you was considered a god. But yet it shows that these gods are not omnipotent, they're not omniscient, they're not all-knowing, they're not omnipresent. Because if you're such a god, you can't even interpret your own dream. But they viewed him as being gods. This is one of the reasons why, we talked about this before, you know how the pharaohs and kings would put forth a decree, and once they put it forth, they couldn't take it back. You would say, well, you're a king, can't you take it back? They could have, really, but they wouldn't. Because of one reason was they were viewed as being gods. And if you put something forth there and take it back, that shows that you made an error. And as a God, I don't make any mistakes, so they would always let things go through. Now, they might add something to it to try to change the situation, but what they had already decreed, it could not be taken back. Just as when they were in Babylon in captivity, and Darius had made a decree to send the people back to Egypt to rebuild the temple. Remember when Ahasuerus, how you pronounce his name, they didn't want the people to go back, but they said, but the previous king already commissioned it. So he left it alone because he viewed them as being that of gods. So here now you'll find this dream is about to be interpreted to them. It says, and Joseph said unto Pharaoh in that very first verse, for anybody using the Bible, we're in Genesis 41:25. It said, Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God have showed Pharaoh what he's about to do. But it starts off by saying, and Joseph said unto Pharaoh, puts a comma there. You know, I read that, it said, Joseph said unto Pharaoh. When I read that, what it reminds me of is, you never know who may come across your path in life. Be careful what we said about how you treat people, because you never know who you may need in this world. And it also shows us so many things, how far God can bring you. Because if you go back and look at Joseph's life, and let's say in a sad way, I don't like to use the word negative here, but in a sad way, keep in mind he was his father's favorite, you could say, right? Or his father favored him. But how about the rest of the family? They didn't favor him. For all they're concerned, this brother here is causing a lot of problems. That you think about his family, you could say in a certain way, banished him. His family in a certain way even betrayed him by selling him into slavery. And he was gone and told a lie to the father that some animal had killed him and whatnot. Then also you look at him, he's right now a convicted felon of sexual assault. Now we know he's innocent, but that's what placed upon him. That's how people will see him, as that. He spent his time, he is out now, and at this very hour he stands before who? Pharaoh. You could almost say a man, he came from nothing to stand before the most powerful man in the country at this time, who needs whose help? He needs his help. That's like saying that somewhere in there they went through all these things and then they're standing before the President of the United States because the President of the United States needs that person. It shows you how far God can bring you, how God will take someone from nothing and make them something. Because keep in mind, in a very short order of time, not in this lesson, he becomes second in command only to who? Pharaoh. He pretty much becomes, in our day and time, we would call it the vice president of the country himself. So you never know who you may need, but now Joseph now speaks to Pharaoh himself. He said the dream of Pharaoh is what? Is one. He just has one dream. Now mind you, he had how many dreams? He had two dreams. Remember he dreamed about the cows, the fat cows being eaten by the skinny cows and the good corn withering away. He said, no, there's not two dreams you have here, but your dreams are yet one. What he means is one in that of his meaning and that of his understanding. He said the dream of Pharaoh is one. He said God had showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. Is Joseph showing Pharaoh? It was God showing Pharaoh. Shows how God will work with even those who are non-believers. In other words, he said God is about to show Pharaoh what he's about. He's literally giving him a prophetic message. But what I like here is he's following the concept of all the prophets. He didn't come forth and say, lift himself up. But he said, God is about to show Pharaoh what he's about to do. When the prophets would always come, they would say, thus saith the Lord. Or they would say, God has said unto me to speak these words to let you know. Because you have to give God the credit for it. You can't mess up as one time Moses did. Anybody know how Moses messed up with one of his messages? And the way Moses messed up, we kind of mess it up too. With our interpretation of that. How did Moses mess up? Let me see if you guys have learned this over the years. How did Moses make a real mistake with God? There we go. Y'all remember that story? The people murmured and they wanted water and all this stuff. And what did Moses do? He goes to God and God tells him what? What are you supposed to do? Speak to the rock. He does what? He hit the rock. And then we stopped right there. We closed the Bible up and we said, he's not going into the promised land. God held him back because he spoke to the rock. Or he hit the rock. He supposed to have spoken to the rock. And we said, that's where he messed up at. Keep on reading. Really, it doesn't speak to him being out of order with God's command. Because when he says that, keep in mind, he goes forth. And what he says to people, he said, must we once again bring you water for all your murmuring? The word said right then and there, God then spoke to him, so you wouldn't take this honor unto yourself. Because what he said was, must we now bring the water? He's talking about him and Aaron got to bring water. God basically said, you're not bringing anything. I'm the one that's bringing it. And for you taking this honor upon yourself, for this reason, guess what? You're not going into the promised land. But I'm allowing you to see it, but I'm going to hold you back. But often we bring forth the interpretation that he hit the rock, he supposed to spoke to it, and so on from there, and we stop. No. He took the honor upon himself. This is why prophets are always kept by saying, thus saith the Lord. Now, some could say, guess what? Study this for yourself and come to your own conclusion because the Bible doesn't tell us clearly. I just have to read things to understand this. Some would say, well, Moses was a good man. Anybody can speak out of turn, right? And say the wrong thing. True. You can say, well, I didn't mean to say it. I did all this. I'm basically saying you. You say, well, why would God be so hard against him? Keep in mind, God also knows your what? So it makes us kind of wonder, like, maybe at that point Moses got a little bit high-minded. Because God knows your heart. And God said, oh, you want to take this honor unto yourself and not give me the honor for what it is I have done to bring my people out. But here you'll find that we keep on with that same concept. It's a dream of Pharaoh is one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. So God's going to show you what he's about to do. That's prophecy. To speak of future revelation that have yet to be revealed, but yet shall surely transpire. So these things are going to happen. He said, the 7 good kind, which is an old 1611 English term for cows, it said, the 7 good kind are 7 years, and the 7 good ears, some of the corn, are 7 years. The dream is one. So in other words, he's telling them, starting out, just 2 dreams you have, really they're one dream. They're one and the same, and they have yet but one meeting. So there's no real reason to go into, some people just put too much theology in scriptures. I've seen people take a scripture and they will run through that thing for 20, 30 minutes. You're like, well, what it just said, you explained it in 5 seconds. There's no need to keep going through it. Because all he's saying here and there, this dream you had of these cows and this corn is but one dream. He says, and the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of that of famine. The 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. He pretty much telling me now there's going to be a 14-year cycle that's going to happen here. In 14 years, you can have some good, and you can have some bad. Because he explains a little bit further when he says, this is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What is about to do, what he about to do, and showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there came 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. 7 years of plenty. If someone would tell you you could have 7 good years of plenty, what's your natural thought would be? If you think about it right now. You can have 7 great years. Everything will go great for you. Everything will be grand. What's your thoughts? What comes to mind right then and there? Jesus said, keep on enjoying the 7 years, what you mean? Okay. Anybody else? Somebody said you could have 7 great years. Don't have to worry about a thing. That's what you're thinking? Remember, we think about what you're thinking. Okay. 7 good years, I ain't got to worry about this thing. I can tell you, Reverend Moore, what some people would say. God said you got 7 years of good and plenty, right? Mm-hmm. Our negative thought is, well, what's going to happen after 7 years? Because you didn't say it was going to continue. You just said 7 good years of plenty. Everybody know folks like this. I mean, that's just our nature. You know, not calling any names, they're not here, but I know a person, oh my Lord. You can tell them the day is going to be a beautiful day. You know what they say, Miss Golden? Yeah, but the man called me hot tomorrow. I'm like, why don't you enjoy today? Friend of ours bought a new Ford 150 truck. You know what everybody said? So-and-so, man, that's a nice truck you got there. Oh, I love that color. He comes along going, I bet that thing burns some gas too, don't it? Otherwise, always go to the negative. You know, but he tell them now you got 7 good years of plenty, which is a good thing. Very good thing to know that you got 7 good years that are ahead of you. But luckily, the story doesn't end there as he goes further along. But to back up a little bit, it says the 7 thin, I'm with verse 27. It says the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears are blessed with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Otherwise, saying to Pharaoh, you got 14 years here of good, and 14 years of bad. Most folks will say right then and there, time he said it was good years, then he said it was bad, they go, there you go again. These prophets always giving us bad news, but when you break it down, is it bad news? No. And why it's not bad news?
Well, he's warning you, letting you know.
That's the key. If he tells you you got 7 good years, Mike, plus 7 bad, now you say, well, I can make a plan now. Because I know what lies ahead. I'm going to do great for right now, but a day going to come where I'm going to need a little something. So therefore, it gives you time to plan out this thing. Because, you know, in this 14-year period, these things are going to happen because it wasn't that Joseph told it to him. God said it. He kept illustrating that this is what God is about to show you that is going to happen. Verse 29 says, behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. In other words, throughout what land? All of it or some of it? So let you know everybody's going to do good. This is going to be a great time. Enjoy this time. And verse 30 says, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And what is famine? So Jesus said, you ain't going to have nothing. That's pretty much what it means. What you once had, oh, it's going away. You know, the food's going to disappear. Anybody ever here went through a famine? Let's say food-wise. How about that? You're thinking, what is a famine? Some of those probably say, yeah, I go through it all the time. Lunch ain't for 4 more hours for lunch. I'm starving. So you're not going through a famine. No, that's a long way from being a famine. Famine is you will have nothing. In other words, everybody will be scrounging, scraping, trying to have something. And oftentimes, too, is, of course, we don't see it here, and I don't want to put things in and not there. When hard times come, you know what also goes up? The crime rate. Because I would like to say it this way. In difficult times, good people will do some bad things to support their family. They're not bad people, but they have to do what it is that they have to do to survive. You know, I watched just the other day, they were showing once again those food drops in Gaza. You know, and all the people are trying to, over there, you know, they're trying to be unified and work together. But when they drop that food, oh, you saw so much fighting and taking, and some people grab whole boxes. You know, instead of distributing, they would grab the whole thing because guess what? They're not being greedy. They got a family to take care of. And they're going to do what it is that they have to do to make ends meet. So when a famine comes along, we can't just look at it as they're not eating. A lot of stuff comes along with that. Some difficult times will lie ahead. He said, there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And notice he keeps saying 7. Number of completion. In other words, these things shall be happening and completed in the order of time. And there shall arise them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. That's how we do it, don't it? We have those good times. The bad times come rather more. We forget about the good times so quick. They came and gone just like that. But luckily here, God has showed this thing to Pharaoh that guess what? A brighter day can come out of this. Difficult times will come, but there is a way to be out of it. It's in the famine shall consume some of the land. Oh, that's what it said. Shall consume the land. In other words, all of it. Just as all of you did good, guess what? Now all of you going to do bad. It comes a time now where people have to pull together and just not get too far ahead of myself. This points to next week's lesson and how the early church all came together as one to support one another in their difficult times. But here you'll find as it goes on, it said, the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason that famine following, it shall be very grievous. Hard times, isn't it? Anybody like bad news? No? But guess what? Sometimes you have to hear that bad news. You know, what's that little silly saying we have? What you don't know won't hurt you? Oh, it can hurt you. Here they have the opportunity now to make a change, an effective change. It's just like in the order of your salvation. When they come along and they preach the message of fire and brimstone, which is being put to the wayside nowadays, because most time it's prosperity. You know, you put in 10, God will give you back 40, you know, and all this kind of stuff. But nobody's really, I shouldn't say nobody, but you be mindful, God's about one purpose, and that is to preach the order of your salvation is what he's looking for here. So basically brings forth this good news by saying in verse 32, and for the dream that was doubled unto Pharaoh twice is because the thing is established by God. Why do you think God told him his dream twice? Remember, it's one dream, but he dreamed twice. But why did God do it twice? Is he hard of hearing? Why have to tell it to him twice? There's a purpose behind that. My grandmother would say to us, I'll tell it to you twice only because you might not have heard me the first time. But you don't want to hear it third time. Father, we're getting that. She would say, I'm only going to tell you twice because the first time you might not have heard me. But why do you think he's dream is twice? It's to drive something home.
Let you know that it's me that's telling you either you're gonna take heed to what I'm saying, or either obey me or disobey me.
You tell him to it twice that he can drive it home, that he can understand it. In other words, it's like repetition is the mother of learning. You repeat it to them so it can finally sink into the head. Starting in your educational field, do you just say it to the student one time and then you're done? 7. I got to change my teaching, guys. Seriously though? 7? Okay. But you have to repeat it to them over and over and over. And you'll find that sometimes some of them get it to maybe to the 5th or 6th time. But you're driving that point home so they can retain it, understand it, and bring it in. So here he gives Pharaoh this dream twice. And you know it's really bothered him, because if you had read the other scriptures, you'll find that he's bringing everybody out the closet to tell me what's going on with this dream. I have to know what's going on, because it was given to him twice. So he realized it now in their culture that a God is speaking to me. Now, I do applaud him for one thing, is, in a sort of way, is that he's believing that God is speaking to him. But unfortunately, he believes a God or gods are speaking to him. But at least he is believing in the gods, because they always believed that when the dream came along, the deity is now speaking to you. But you'll find now that God uses Joseph to let him know who is speaking to you. Because Joseph never said at any point, this is what I say. He said, this is what God is saying to you, the God of his. It said the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. In other words, it's going to happen in a quick period of time. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Plans put into place. Anybody here operate off a budget? None of y'all budget. I wish I had y'all money. Because I got a budget. I got to think 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month ahead of time. Okay, I can do this, but I can't do that. I can do this, I can do this. I got to pay this and do that, and so on from there. But basically, it's a plan being put into place. You know, you got 7 years of good, but following that wall, it could be 7 years of bad. So what we have to do? He said, well, first of all, I need somebody in place that can manage these things. It's like having a financial advisor. You can't have everybody or anybody just watching over things. Somebody who effectively knows what it is they're doing. This way, I said, bring forth someone who is discreet and wise, and set them over the land of Egypt. Don't just put anybody there, because it's not just you you're dealing with. You're dealing with who? It's one thing to have your affairs, but it's nothing to handle everybody in your affairs. So you got to be wise with what it is you're doing. It said, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land. So in other words, it's not going to be just what? One person. You can have somebody who's going to head this thing up, but also others are going to answer to that individual, and they're all going to work together for the common good of that of the people. And appoint officers over the land, and take up a 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. So in other words, don't use it all, don't eat it all, don't spend it all, but you have to take some and set aside, what the black folk said, for a rainy day. You got to put some aside for that rainy day, because it's coming. And you have to be diligent and do this. He said, only put a 5th aside, a part of the land, in the 7 plenteous years. Because you find that, does time fly? When you get to be your age? I ain't saying my age, but it's true. Don't time just fly? Just like that, just about that 7 years will come and go so quick. You know, I always hated, pastors up there, I always hated when the students say, I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to take 2 years off. Then I'm going back to school. I always say, you better stay in there. That time's going to be going so fast. Because they missed that year, guess what? They don't go back. They get a job and they start working. And they say, I wish I had stayed in school. Because all my buddies said that time is gone. It's already behind me. So basically, you watch it, because time will go by so quickly. So he said the thing's going to happen soon. So start now saving up for this day that's going to come. It says, verse 34 again, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up a 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. 35 says, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let him keep food in the cities. The food in the cities, there were cities that were set aside just for storage. You could say almost like giant warehouses that were put in place. But he's saying, store up all this food and set it aside. Don't touch it. It's like that savings. You got checkings in the savings, don't you? But then again, y'all don't budget. Y'all just got money. You don't divide it up. But basically, you got a checking, you got a savings. This is here for spending. Expensive, whatever. This here, you don't want to touch. Or you could call it your retirement or your 401, whatever it is. Let that sit over there. You don't want to bother that because some days going to come where you may need some of that money. So he said, put this all aside and let them gather all the food of those good years that come and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh and let them keep the food in the cities. And the last verse says, and that food shall be for store in the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. In other words, it could be 7 tough years, but you're going to make it through. In fact, they had stored up so much that guess what? People came from all over just to come to Egypt. All over came just to Egypt so they wouldn't be a part of famine. As a matter of fact, even Joseph's family also came up to Egypt, but that's a whole nother lesson to get into. But basically, this food was stored up so that everyone could survive. And when you're in a position where you can help others, as Pastor would say, our mandate, if God blessed us, we will do what? Bless someone else. And that of blessing others. You'll find that in God's realm, you have this theocracy where God rules the land. His ruling is that everyone would be as one. Just as next week's lesson, I can't wait to get to that one, which deals with that of the early church, pulling their goods together, poor and rich, to help those that were in need. When I read that and looked toward the next week, I said, wow, the United States needs to learn a whole lot from that. Because, we had all kinds of USAID, helping people all through the world and all. But in the last year, all that's been taken away. It's let people fend for themselves. All sorts of support and help. Pull it back, let people fend for themselves. But then we say what? God bless America. You're like, James said, out of the same mouth proceeded blessings and cursings. These things are not be so. In other words, you can't be saying bless us over here and curse folks over here. You all need to be together as one because hard times shall come. But in this lesson that we had before us, and God is all-knowing, is that God knows and shows us what's going to happen in the near future. He also let Pharaoh know that this is what you need to do that you may survive. But it also is a bigger plan too, is for Joseph's family also to survive, of the children of Israel. Jacob and all of them will come to Israel. Unfortunately, they stayed too long, but that's another story in and of itself. But here we're dealing with how God here knows all, sees all, and is all. Joseph had no understanding of interpreting dreams. He always said, God shall show you what the dream says. And God would basically work through him to bring about this interpretation of dreams. And all this basically leads us to our lesson that of next week, which deals with that of the books of Acts with 2 people named Ananias and Sapphira. I'm going to give you a little backdrop. You have now everybody pulling all their goods together, right, to help out one another. You have 2 people that are in a position where they can help also, but they want to lie about it and keep some of it for themselves. Tragic story, but guess what? They think nobody knows about it. But we're dealing with an omniscient God. We're dealing with all-knowing. God knows all about it, and that's our lesson that we did for next week. But this lesson, like I said, wasn't a deep lesson or a deep theological lesson. It's based on how God knows all, and God even set things up to watch over those who even are non-believers. Because Pharaoh didn't believe in God. As far as following God, he believed that God existed along with all the other gods. But yet God used him to bring his people through some difficult and some that of harsh times. Any comments? Because guess what, folks? First time ever, I think, in years, we finished 5 minutes beforehand, almost 10 minutes. Normally, we'd be going on and on. We said verse 1. But this one, we actually had the opportunity to finish because it deals with God warning Pharaoh through a dream. No comments? If no comments, we can have a closing word of prayer and y'all can fellowship and get ready for the next service. With that being said, so we stand to our feet. Reverend Morris, if you will, give us a closing word of prayer to bring us into the worship service.